Good morning, my students. Today we're going to address the topic of Camargo Guarnieri, this person right here. And this painting here is a painting of a contemporary of Guarnieri called Workers, or in Portuguese, Operários. And these are all Brazilian people. You notice that there is a variety of people here, right? And all of them are equally Brazilian. All right. So here we are talking about this Brazilian composer who was also an ethnomusicologist and grew up with diverse musical backgrounds. He was not a popular music composer. He was not a composer of music considered to be, he was not a performer of folk music. He was an art music composer, but he heard lots of pop music. He heard lots of folk music of different people in different areas. That's the job of an ethnomusicologist. And you ask me, ethno what? Ethnomusicology is the study of music from the cultural and social aspects of the people who make it. So the point of view of an indigenous person, for example, right here, about the indigenous people music, instead of the point of a Frenchman about indigenous music. So here is an ethnomusicologist recording an indigenous person to later study the singing. And Bela Bartok, as you recall, was one of those ethnomusicologists / composers that we already discussed. Some details about the life of Guarnieri. He was born in 1907. In his early life, well, he was born in a small rural town, so he had in his childhood much exposure to music of caipiras, which is a kind of specific kind of people of his region in which he was born, and it's specific kind of folk music, and also to music of candomblé, which is a Afro-Brazilian religion. There was a candomblé center near his house, and as a child he would listen to the music coming from there. And also he was taught by his father Western art music. So he was exposed to all of this kind of music, and as a talented improviser and composer, he started playing on the piano music that mixed all of that, which called the attention of Mario de Andrade. He met Mario, and Mario was an ethnomusicologist. He was many things. He was a journalist, he was a critic, he was an artist, he was a writer, he was a poet. Here is a painting of him by one of his artist friends. And Guarnieri received more training in Western art music, not from Mario, but from a friend of Mario who taught him composition, conducting, all sorts of skills that a musician might want to have, while Mario taught Guarnieri philosophy and all sorts of complicated lessons on the complicated thought processes, complicated topics that were not pertaining to music, but of culture in general. And with Mario's influence, Guarnieri made many field trips to the northwest of Brazil, was very far away from where he lived, and that has a specific kind of music. And to indigenous sites, he visited many indigenous sites and recorded and notated the music that he was hearing, as well as listening to religious music of different religions and so on. He had a vast repertoire of different kinds of music. The legacy of this composer. He is, for us Brazilians, one of the most important composers that ever lived in our country. And he is not well known outside of Brazil. His death was in 1993. Now, let's talk a little bit about Brazilian art music. Here is Villa-Lobos. This composer, even if you're not familiar with him, he is one of the most famous Brazilian or Latin American composers of all time. He was a nationalist in the same sense that Sibelius was, or Tchaikovsky, or Dvorak. He brought topics of his culture into the art that was found in Germany, France, and Italy. So Western art music with nationalist topics. But for Guarnieri and Mario and other ethnomusicologists, there were questions to be asked. Where did Villa-Lobos' sources for his musical vocabulary come from? Because as a fact, Villa-Lobos never visited an indigenous site or spent time with Afro-Brazilian religions or anything. He was really famous in Europe, and he told Europeans histories like that he was abducted by a cannibal tribe and almost eaten by them, which was a complete lie. But anyway, this helped him become very famous, and his music is worth it. I'm glad that he made people know his music because it's incredible. You may listen to it when you're home. So Brazilian art music borrows from Europe the concept of what music is. So many Brazilians would write symphonies and all sorts of forms and kinds of thinking that are related to European art music. Just like what happened in America, right? You have lots of art music that is similar in form and shape to European music, but with, of course, more American topics and or American original creations. The question asked by these ethnomusicologists about Villa-Lobos and other nationalists is, how can you write Brazilian music if you don't ask yourself first the question what it is to be Brazilian? And this is very complicated. Let's take a look at Brazilians. This is a group of Brazilians. The white dresses are part of a religious tradition. These are also Brazilians. And these are also Brazilians. And the question is, do all these people sing and play the same music? I think based on the clothes and everything we know about these people, no, it's different kinds of music. So the concept of Mário de Andrade and Guarnieri and followers is that if you are to write an art music to be called Brazilian, it has to be a synthesis of all kinds they could find that was music being made by Brazilians. So nationalism is more complicated than it seems for these composers. It's not only about feeling Brazilian, it's also about thinking hard about what it is to be Brazilian. Let's listen to Dança Negra by Camargo Guarnieri. Although the concept of Guarnieri was to study all kinds of music that he could find in Brazil, it doesn't mean that all his compositions have to be a synthesis of all these kinds. It will be some sort of Frankenstein music. In fact, Guarnieri composed atonal music using characteristics of different folk music, and his work is very varied in style and in genres and forms. Dança Negra is a synthesis of music of an Afro-Brazilian religion called Candomblé, and of European art music, and maybe a little bit of jazz with the question mark that I will address later. Let's listen to this music. So here, the melody you just heard will be repeated and varied. So theme and variations, right? The European form. But this repetitive pattern, rhythmic pattern, ta 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 ta, it's from African Afro-Brazilian tradition. The melody is mostly pentatonic, like the pentatonicism of Debussy, you know, scales that use only 5 notes instead of 7. It's not very European at all. And it is African indeed. But also there's polyphony. We just heard we heard a section. Well, if you didn't catch that, you will see with more than 2 voices, each one doing a different thing. And if you notice, from now on, the music will start to grow as it repeats. The rhythmic pattern changed. The harmony has changed a lot too. The climax here, or not yet. Here we are back to the first texture, the first sound that we were hearing at the beginning of the music. But the repetitions of this theme try to emulate the kind of trance that is created when someone participates in the kind of Afro-Brazilian religion called candomblé, which is very repetitive and based in dance, and tries to create this kind of alternate state of mind called trance. That has its religious connotations. And I think this music, as it keeps growing and it reaches this climax there, it's hard to not be infected by the rhythm and completely absorbed by this. I don't know, I think this music is very hypnotic, and I love it because of that. Now let's take a look at a conclusion here, and there's a secret program. This conclusion is Guarnieri moving away from the candomblé meeting or retro after it ended. So that's why it's soft now, because no, not after it ended, while it was still going. So he's moving away while the music can still be heard. Coda. So that was a jazz like any, in my opinion. But if you think about it, Afro-Brazilian religions and jazz, what do they have in common? Influence of Africans, of course. Let's take a look at an analysis really quick here. Polyphony in sound, both Afro-Brazilian traditions and European traditions use that. I can attest that to you. But European tends to be more polyphonic. The melody, the use of pentatonic scale is Afro-Brazilian, and the chromatic scale used is European. So chromatic scale, when you have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, instead of just the plain C, D, E, you have all those black notes, you know, of the piano. The harmony, Afro-Brazilian ritual music have static harmony, and the repetition creates the state of trance. The changes in harmony are very European because the theory of music dictates that art music has to have changes in harmony. The rhythm, both traditions can be repetitive, but when it gets very complex, it's mostly because of Afro-Brazilian rhythms. And the form, it's theme and variations. If it was theme and repetitions alone, it would be African, but theme and variations is very European. So let's finish the lesson here with recapitulating the main points. And recapitulation is a very European concept. Just kidding. It was a joke about sonata form. Anyways, nationalism is more complicated than it seems. If your people is very complex, and it's hard to, really say someone is 100% Brazilian, because it's there's so many types of Brazilian. I'm of course a Brazilian that's not indigenous, and I'm not black. So I'm one of many Brazilians there are. Diversity is the concept of all these people, and synthesis is using a little bit of all the music to create one art style and call it Brazilian, or any other nationality. Ethnomusicology is the science of studying a culture from the point of view of people that actually belong to that culture, instead of an outsider's point of view, and using that in music generates interesting music like this danza negra that we just heard, or music by Bartok, or music by many other Latin American composers or Asian composers, etc. And Latin America's art music tend to be like that, because each country has its own ethnic complications and mixtures. And I hope you enjoyed talking about this. And thank you. Have a great rest of your semester.